Ow. Hey everyone, back with another video, and this time I thought I would do a bit of a more direct comparison between the Thokk Weaponmaster and the Infinities. Simply because that is a question that I've been asked, just which one I would maybe recommend over the other or which one I would prefer. And I thought it would just be interesting maybe to put this all in a video, because it isn't really a straight direct one or the other answer that I can really give, at least not 100%. There's a bit more that goes into it really. So that is what this video will all be about. Before we get to that though, formalities out of the way as per usual, and that is, I've bought both of these products with my own money, and neither company was aware that there was any kind of review going on. The structure of the video will be the same as always, that is, there will be the talking part after this formalities part here, then there will be a part where we have the photos, and then if there are any clips, they'll come after that, and that will be it. The talking part itself I will try to structure roughly in the same way that I did with the Thokk first impression and review. And that is, I will talk about the optics and the size, I will talk about the comfort and maneuverability, I will talk about the durability, and then in the end just try to wrap it all up and bring it together, basically. I will not talk about the ordering process in this video, because that's not what this is about. If you want to see what I have to say, or hear what I have to say about that, I'll pin the original reviews down in the description as well. And generally, I will put timestamps, as always, down in the description, so I know my videos are on the longer side usually, so you can just jump around and take away whatever you want from it. Okay, so I said I was gonna start with optics and size, but there was one more thing I actually wanted to say, and that is kind of like just as a thing to keep in mind, is that there is no cure-all, one-size-fits-all magic design for a glove, right? You can try to put a focus on protection, but then you have to see how complex do you make the design. If you want to make it very protective and very flexible at the same time, you know, where maneuverability is just optimal, then you will just have to make a rather complex design. And if you do that, then that comes at a price. Quite literally, it will be costly, and you will have to make a more complex design. And more complex designs usually mean that there's more moving parts, and more moving parts generally means it can, you know, more parts that can break. You can try to keep it a bit simpler and still make it rather protective, but then you will just have to see, right? The design will not be as complex. It can't be if you don't want to make it complex and pricey, but that will mean that it will come at a cost when it comes to maneuverability. You will feel it. If it is a simpler design, then that is just where you have to take that from, right? Or you can try to basically make it a softer design, see that it is really comfortable, really maneuverable, but then that will come at a cost when it comes to how well it can protect you, really. Because if you forgo hard plates in certain places, that will certainly make it easier to get the fingers together, to move your thumb about, move your wrist. That will be nicer, but you know, less hard plates means less hard plates that can actually protect you when you do get hit. And there's other ways you can try and solve that, but that is just how it goes, right? What I'm basically trying to say is just keep in mind that just because a glove doesn't really do what you would want it or need it to do doesn't necessarily mean it is a bad glove, just that it isn't quite the right glove for what you want to do with it, really. And you just have to see which glove fits what you are doing. And for my part, the gloves are probably what I have most of. I have 2 jackets that I use and that are fine pretty much with everything I want to do. But when it comes to glove, I have a bunch more. And I think there's hardly a way around that. Okay, so optics and size. In this part in particular, you will have to forgive me if I have to rummage around in my little room here a bit, because I want to give some examples with swords to make my point, but it means I have to, you know, go down and pick up swords and change gloves and all these things. So bear with me. Just purely optics. That is kind of subjective, but I think it is interesting because I will have to admit that just, you know, from just looking at them, I like the Thokks much better. I still wish they would have been in all black, but, you know, things aside, they pretty much look like motorcycle gloves. I really had to get used to the kind of brutalist design of the Infinities. By now I like them, partly I think because I do kind of associate them with my hand being well protected, and that is just a plus. But I can understand if just looking at the Infinities one would maybe be turned off a bit, because I certainly was. But yeah, they grew on me after a while, as rough as they are. I think they just tried to make the most complex, simple design that they could. The Thokks are much easier on the eye in that regard. Kind of optics and size, because, you know, if you look at them, for me at least, the Infinities always looked like big gloves. Those big, heavy gloves. And as I said in my preview or early impression and the review, with the Thokks I really thought that they wouldn't be, but neither of these are small. The biggest difference is probably in the fingers, not necessarily the back of the hand, but fingers, because the Thokks have no plates or nothing basically on the inside of the fingers, which means that you can get the fingers much closer together, which means that the footprint here on the fingers is smaller, which is great or better for knuckle bows, right? The Infinities have full protection between the fingers, at least as far as the plate here goes, right? And that means you can't get them as close, and that can be a problem for knuckle guards, really. In general, both have big thumbs because of the caps. The Infinities are definitely bigger though. But the important thing I would say is that neither glove is small, really. And particular, as soon as you have more complex design, if you have a simple cruciform kind of hilt, longsword or an early type or Eastern type saber, then with either you are good to go usually, unless the grip is very short, then you can run into problems, and you will probably run into problems with the Infinities a bit quicker than you will with the Thokks. But then generally speaking you will probably be fine. But as soon as you have something like a side sword or early type rapier or something, then things will become interesting. For example, if you take this newly refurbished Portuguese sword, thanks Alberto, then, you know, it's fine with the Thokks. Just, it fits perfectly fine. There's enough room with the thumb to get through comfortably. You're good to go. Same though, basically, with the Infinities, right? The ring is big enough that you won't really have a problem getting in or out. Nothing will really get in the way with this. You are good to go. And it's quite comfortable with both, really, to do that. As soon as you have something that is a bit smaller though, because frankly the rings here are big, then you will see more of a difference. Like for example, if we take these simple Quetun side sword, not a problem with the Thokk, you're good here. You will have to do a bit more work to get into them with the infinities. You will kind of have to tilt, and that's easier if you do not have a glove on them, frankly. You kind of have to tilt that plate a bit to get through, and have to maybe push in a plate here or there. As soon as you've done that though, you are again good to go, right? That's, I'd say, workable, really. Not necessarily quite as comfortable, but it will do, it will work. But that is still fairly, it's not necessarily big, but you know, it's a finger ring of a decent size. It certainly isn't the smallest hilt of this type that I've ever seen, right? Allow me a minute to get out here. As soon as you go to something that is smaller, then, well, for example, if you take this Blos Sophia, I think it's one of the earliest ones he made, so that's why it looks like that. I think by now it looks a bit different. Still love it though. Then you have a hilt that is of what I would say a good size. You know, it's not tiny, it isn't overly huge. When I wear motorcycle gloves of that sort, then I'm fine. But if you try that with the infinities, then it's fairly obvious that that just isn't gonna work. There's no way in the world that you will get that finger through that ring, and it isn't really made to be used without it, I would say. I mean, even then, as you can see, it's a bit on the small side. Thing is though, it's not that it will work with the Thokks either. You get a bit further, but you know, still, no can do. This won't work, and if you ever get it in, I would be worried about getting it out, to be honest. And still, right, it's still too big to be used without the finger ring, and again, it kind of isn't really made to. So neither of these gloves are really small. You really have to check if they will work with your hilt. If you take any kind of more complex baskety type of hilt, then again you will just run into problems. But you will run into problems with either glove, simply because backplate or fingers. If you have any ring to the side, like with this Alchem Spadroon, then you just won't get past it, right? You won't get your hand in. And if you have any kind of more complete basket hilt, then just forget it. Arguably, why would you? But just to make a point, really. I find that for both gloves, the biggest problem is any kind of ring, and after that, knuckle bows. Really, because you have the finger caps that just make it hard to get through the ring. I can't use my Sophia with either glove, or the Dorothea from Landsknecht's Emporium. I can't get the thumb through the thumb ring with either. Again, same problem. And after that, mostly you have a problem with the knuckle bow, really, because then it comes also to back of the hand and how close can you get your fingers together. If you have a hilt with a knuckle bow that takes that into account, like this armor class Spadroon, then it will probably work, right? The infinities have a bigger footprint than the Thokk, but if your hilt accounts for it, then it will still work, really. So, oh yeah, and another thing is, of course, if it will work with the Thokks without the LBAs, as soon as you have the longsword as add-on on, you will run into problems again, because it increases the footprint. For one, of course, if you try to use any kind of fingering without it, you're good to go. As soon as you have that on, it's not made to work with that. It just gets in the way, really. And the same goes for if you have any kind of more complex hilt or knuckle bow, right? Works without it. Gets in the way as soon, really, as you want to try it with. You can sometimes still kind of make it work, especially if it is a thin one, but the longsword badass add-on will just cause more problems. But again, the Thokks are a bit smaller than the Infinities, but neither glove is small. That is just something you have to take into account. As soon as the more complex your hilt, the more problems you will have with either. The biggest problem probably being the finger. Can you get it through any kind of ring that you really have? And then you have just the bulk of the fingers and the back of the hand for knuckle guards or any kind of basket hilt, really. So they are same-ish, really. Okay, so comfort, maneuverability. Generally, I am fine with both. I think both are in their own right comfortable gloves. Things like getting into the glove, very easy with the Infinities once you've got them broken in, and even when you are sweaty and try to get them on and off between bouts, very easy in that regard, really. Not a problem at all. Still works well enough with the Thokks, especially once the inlay, the inner glove, has been inside of it for a while and had kind of a chance to settle in. More of a break-in period, because the inside glove can make the outer glove, or the glove as a whole, then be a bit tight, but after a break-in period I would say they are both good. If you have sweaty hands, like when you have to do it between bouts, because I don't know, you need to tie your shoe or something, or want to have a drink or anything, then you will have probably a bit more of a problem with the Thokks, just because of the inner outer glove design of the Thokks, as I mentioned in my early impression and review. Getting in, if you stick to the inner glove and then push your hand in, that can create folds, and while that isn't a ginormous problem, it is definitely something that I personally kind of hate. But you can work with it. It's not terrible, and I think most importantly, it doesn't create hotspots that I noticed so far, so it's more of a personal preference. I've heard nobody else complain about it, so it might just be a me thing. Generally speaking though, getting into the glove for both is fine. Slight preference for the Infinities in that regard, personally. General comfort while wearing them, that is a thing of, after switching back to the Infinities, after having worn the Thokk for a while, because I wanted to use them as much as I could, I had to get used to the Infinities again. I think they are comfortable, I like wearing them, but it does come with more of a getting used to it phase compared to the Thokks, really. And I think that is mostly down to inside of the fingers, because for the Thokks, for the very most part, the inside of the fingers is protected because the shell goes around. But that means that you can't get your fingers as close together, which feels a bit weird, right? Normally when you grab anything, you have your fingers close together, of course, right? But here it is more like this, and that feels a bit odd. But you get used to it and you can work for it. But since there are no plates or padding, really anything in the inside of the Thokks, you can get them much closer together. And that just feels a bit more natural just when wearing them. Also, and that's again something is where it comes to the plates really is just that you can't really straighten your fingers like completely with the infinities because you have kind of this pre-bent design here. Not a problem really when you have any sword in your hand and when you're moving it about, but just, you know, when you're outside of it. It's nothing major because for the most part you will grip it here, but you notice once you take them off, really. That's not a problem you have with the Thokks, unless you have the longsword badass add-on on, because then again you have that pre-bend thing, and then if you really want to straighten your fingers, then you'll notice it. But other than that, because there are no plates in that regard that overlap the same way or are pre-bent, the Thokks are definitely more comfortable in that regard for just, you know, moving, flexing your fingers. General maneuverability, I would say that both are fine. Like thumb maneuverability for moving it about is fine really. Gripping anything is fine. Again, a bit more of the plates here to get in the way, but you know, on the other hand, it means that you can kind of pinch things from the ground, like having really long nails. That kind of works. Can't really do that as much here, but then again, you have a bit of better feeling with those, so I guess it evens out in a way. Maneuverability when it comes to the glove, just, you know, the wrist, which is always a thing. Neither are as flexible as when I don't wear a glove, of course, right? If you compare it, just, that's not the same really. But I needed a bit more break in time with the infinities. Again, because there's plates to get in the way, and by now they just shift over each other and it's fine. But that is something I just didn't have really with the Thokks, because, well, there's some padding here, but no real hard plate to get in the way. So in that regard, I would say more breaking time, but I would say they really end up being comparable. Where you will notice things, especially if you do not have the LBAs on, is when it comes to within a hilt. Basically, as I mentioned in the size portion, just the plates move the fingers just away from each other a bit, and then that means that you will have more of a fight to get into a hilt. And especially with the infinities, it can just happen that because you have these plates here on the side, that are both very important because they protect the sides of your fingers from cuts, thrusts, etc. But because of the way that they are made, when you make a fist, they kind of protrude, and then you have that part where you can just wrap over a nail or a crossguard or a knuckle bow down below. It is something where you just kind of like have to get used to. Once you have it right for something like the spadroon here, then you're mostly good. If you have something like a messer, for example, you will probably have a bit more of a problem, like this Kleinkriegsmesser here from Landsknecht's Emporium, and that's a pretty beefy nail you have there, but it just can slip over it, or it can even slip under. Nothing you can't really correct. That's the part where in messer fencing, when I used the infinities, and then you can just see me between bouts just grip the blade and correct my grip, and then I'm good again. But other than that, just mostly I'm fine with the maneuverability that they have. But as I said in the very beginning, basically, that is just part of the design. That is just how they are made, because if you want plates on the side, you kind of have to make sure that they overlap probably, but that also means that unless it's very complex, you will have things that can get in the way. That is not a problem that you will have with the infinities, right? Because if you put those on, there are no blades, there are no plates here that can catch and that is a bit nicer in mesa fencing in that regard. I focus on mesa fencing because I find that, especially in mesa fencing, your hand has to be really, really flexible. You have to change grips all the time, right? And if you have a plate, then that can just get in the way. Same with a knuckle bow. There are no plates here on the side, so there are no plates that can snag. But that is not because the gloves are better, I would say. It is just there are no plates on the side here, so that is why that. If there would be anything hard that would stand off, you would probably have the same problem, because the size here on the back of the hand going to the fingers is similar. Unless it would be within the glove, then that would probably be something different. But again, no plates to the side, so that's where that goes. So again, overall, I would say the Infinities and the Thokks, as far as maneuverability goes, I would say comparable, really. The problems that I have with the Infinities, I know why they are there. They are not there because the glove is worse. It's just that you have more plates on the side and they can just get in the way. Ulrich just shaved the thorn off a bit on the side and basically just compromised on protection for the side of the fingers a bit, compared to just, you know, having a bit less of a problem with it getting caught on the nagel. That is a choice you can make, really. Small side note actually to the comfort. I just noticed that make sure though that the Velcro lines up, because I actually just managed to scratch myself on the Velcro several times just from, you know, putting it on and off again several times for the review. Okay, so protection, right? That's definitely an interesting part, I would say. Overall, just to get that out of the way right away, is the Infinities are definitely better when it comes to that. Right? If you want to just have the details on the problems I have, check out my review, or the early impression. Really didn't really change in between those. But yeah, part of why the Infinities are less comfortable when it comes to getting it into any kind of hilt, or just, you know, from wearing them, is also part of why they are better when it comes to protection. Biggest part, I know I keep harping on about it, but it kind of always comes back to that, is protection on the inside of the fingers. The Thokks don't really have anything. There's nothing here, just other than the slight material from the gloves, really. And there is some kind of padding here on the outside, but again, no hard plates. With the Infinities, you have plates on the outside. This part here that always gets in the way is to protect the side, right? Down here as well. And you can't really get your fingers as close, which means you can get into, you will have more problems getting into some hills, and it is not as natural feeling. But it also means that if you do get anything here on the side, then you are protected. There just isn't anything here, right? And as I said in my review, the longsword badass add-ons, especially when you take for the side, I don't think they solve that problem. They do add bulk though, and you will have even more problems getting into any kind of hilt. And the thing is, you know, you can say that, all right, the Thokks maybe weren't meant for longsword when it came to more intense longsword. On the website it says that for intense longsword sparring, or tournament level sparring, then tournament level fencing rather, then you should use the longsword badass add-ons. Even though, as I said, the problems I have with them aren't really solved. But even if you then go, all right, okay, maybe not longsword, but if we look at side sword, for example, well, it's side swordish arming sword. You know, I leave the categorization up to you, but it is a sword with a finger ring. And yeah, that's definitely comfortable, that works fine. Especially because, right, it feels natural because you don't have anything between your fingers, but it also means that if you get a cut, I have the nails here, or effectively they're nails, they're probably not called nails, but effectively, those protect my finger here. But if they weren't there, I could get a cut on a part where there really isn't any kind of hard protection at all. It is more finicky to get into here, but here I have plates protecting the sides of my fingers from cuts from below and from cuts from above, right? There was that one thrust I caught first time using the Thokks, and that was here. Just basically here. And there is no protection on the Thokks, really. And I felt that for several days. I had a welt there, right? I could feel it, it was sensitive. And it could have been on the joint because there is nothing on the joint part here either. I was just kind of lucky that the thrust didn't get me on the joint in and of itself. And that is something that just leaves me a bit worried, really. When fencing with them in our club, we generally, for what we do, feel fine with them. But we also had cuts on the Thokks where there was definitely a sharper pain. Nothing that lasted, but it's kind of a thought process that you then start having where it is just, was it just quote unquote the glove doing its job? Or was I maybe just lucky because I didn't get hit on the side, but a bit more up here, and then it actually caught the plate? Because also the plates here are not through the whole length of the accented parts, right? There is nothing hard here in the middle, which is again a problem you do not have with the infinities, because you have the whole of your finger, as much as possible at least, encased in hard plastic, pretty sturdy hard plastic. And that is just something where I really have to say that if you want to do tournament level fencing or fence with weapons that can hit hard, like if you want to do more intense sparring, not necessarily tournament level, but more intense, harder sparring with Messer, for example, I am not 100% sure I would necessarily recommend the Thokks for that, because Messers can hit as hard as longswords, especially if you have, you know, something like the Kleinkriegsmesser, which is a small Kriegsmesser, basically. That's why it's called that. And if you get a hit from that between the plates on the finger here, if you get a thrust with that on the side of the finger here, it could go wrong. And again, the longsword badass add-ons don't really solve that problem. So for medium level, medium to a little more intense sparring, I would say that the Thokks are fine, but they have their gaps where even if you look at the video from the thrust, that wasn't a hard thrust. Ulrich and I weren't going at it. We were basically still in the right, you know, explore how we can even move with these gloves phase. But it was I moved into the thrust with my hand, the blade didn't immediately bend, and I felt that because, again, no hard protection on the side here. So that is just something that you really have to keep in mind. There are gaps in the protection here that aren't with the infinities. So if it is more intense, or if you really want to be on the safe side, and if you know your head can fit it, hilt can fit it, that way around, then personally there are definitely things I rather do with the infinities than with the Thokks. Like I keep harping on about pressure testing Glasgow Play 5. That is just, I wouldn't do that with that here necessarily, because you have the plates going around here. That means that once it presses down, the plate connects with the blade or the grip, and then it absorbs the shock. You can't do that here, just because there isn't anything, right? It would just squish your finger. So that also means I can't necessarily recommend them for something like bayonet fencing, right? If I do bayonet fencing with my Mauser rifles, then those weigh 4.5 kilos. And if you catch your hand between two of those, you will be thankful for having, you know, a plate that can absorb the shock. Sure, there's padding here, better than wearing just motorcycle gloves, or if you're completely mad, nothing. But definitely a more painful experience with those, I would say. So when it comes to protection, there's a reason these are designed the way they are. And there are just, I'm sorry to say, obvious gaps, to me at least, in the protection of the Thokks. Durability. Now, first and foremost, I think it is important to keep in mind that no part of your equipment will last forever. And that is including swords, right? They are equipment. They are meant to be used. At some point, they will just break. Simple as. And that's all right. If my glove breaks, but my hand is fine, then it's done its job, and that's okay. I will still probably be a bit grumpy because I might have to wait for infinities for a while to get new ones. But generally speaking, you know, that's all right. That is perfectly fine. It's also, of course, I have to say that I have a much more long-term impression of the infinities compared to the Thokks, because I have them for much longer. But still, I think it's fair to talk about them. So I did have some things that needed fixing in my time already with the infinities, right? They are rugged. I would say they are sturdy. They survive a lot, but they are not indestructible. For example, you can see the red tip here on my thumb. That was just something where the end of the cap just broke off. But again, something which I don't really mind, because that was kind of unlucky. A thrust connected and just slid up to the cap from the inside and just tore it out. I don't think it was really meant to withstand that kind of force, really. And I mean, I duct taped and glued it back in place, and I feel like it still works fine enough. I also had to tape the fingers here because they kept, basically, it's the inside glove is like screwed to the inside of the shells, and it kept just, my fingers kept sagging out a bit, for lack of a better word, so I just put hockey tape after some recommendation around it, and you know, that fixes that problem for me. I also had to shave off a bit of the plate here on the pinky because it created a hotspot for me. So there are definitely things I had to fix in my time with the infinities. There are also things where I just didn't mind and didn't really fix, like one, and try not to be too shocked, but here, the inside plate of the finger. There is a plate here, and one of the screws just slipped out of the glove. I could have had it fixed. I contacted the manufacturer and they offered to fix it for me. They also told me how to fix it myself, and I could have done it. I just, you know, that's not on the glove, that's on me. I know how to fix it, I just didn't do it because it's my non-dominant hand for fencing, and I just didn't really get around it so far. But you know, that's again, they are not infallible. There are definitely things that you need to take care of, and at some point those will also break. In general though, if you just, I hope the camera shows it, otherwise I'll just try to capture it on photo. They have caught a number of blades, especially in mesa fencing, where just binding and winding and then you just catch a cut on the hand. But they held up great. You can see all the scuff marks they got, but I don't feel that they are compromised in any way. I still feel perfectly fine with them, right? The Thokks, I'm sorry to say, really are a different story in that regard. And not necessarily by design, but more by QA, I think. Oh, wrong hand. We had our own share of problems with durability. We had the strap on 2 of the LBAs just tear out, just one immediately and one after a bit of use. I had my thumb plate break when I tried to do what they say in their advertisements and shape them to my individual thumb. We got it replaced, but you know, I'll need to try that again to see how it goes. Ulrich had the side of the thumb cut at the seam, and again, we still don't quite know how that happened. We assume it was a burr, a nick on a blade, but you know, that is blade contact, contacting the blade with your hand in mesa fencing, not unusual at all. So that happened. And I've also, you know, since just publishing my review, looking at the comments I got below that or on Facebook, not necessarily unique problems, right? I had people tell me that they were thrust through the glove, really. I had more people tell me that the straps tore out. That really seems to be a problem, and I hope they have fixed it by now, but it definitely was a problem. More plates breaking, plates on the back of the hand arriving broken or breaking, thumb caps even arriving broken. So, or just, you know, seams just tearing open, like my inside glove, as I showed in the review. Just one seam is just starting to come apart, really. And I only took it in and out a number of times, really. And that just is starting to come apart already. And I don't have them for that long. And seeing that they are more expensive than the Infinities, even without the longsword bearers add-on, I at the moment have a bit of a feeling that they really need to get quality control under control. There just seems to be problems there. I mean, of course I don't know how many gloves were sold and how many of those had problems. There's no kind of survey going on, at least none that I know of, but still, for that price I would want a glove that doesn't immediately break. And that is a bit of a problem that I really see, that just durability seems to be a bit of an issue with the Thokk. And while there are definitely things that after a while you will need to take care of with the Infinities, and even after more whiles any equipment will break, the stuff I've seen and read about with the Thokks is just too soon, really. They're not out that long. Trying to wrap it all up, really. Trying to come to a conclusion. So as I said in the beginning, there is no one-size-fits-all wonder design for gloves. There are choices that you make in the design, and these choices that you make come at a cost. They come with consequences. With the Infinities, I really feel that they tried to make the most simple, complex design that they could. As a result, I would say that they are not the most comfortable glove that you can always wear. They do not protect as well as clamshells, and they are not as affordable as other, maybe lighter gloves. But they do a fairly good job at being a rather simple and yet still complex design. It is still a 5-finger glove, and they do protect your hand rather well. And they are rather rugged. They survived a lot already, and the problems I had I could fix myself. Right? Where I needed to shave off plates, I could. When I needed to glue something, I could. Now, if the inside glove will have a problem, then that's probably the point where I need to send it in for repairs or decide whether I maybe want to get a completely new one. But until then, these have, and I am quite confident, will continue to hold up great. And that is really why I like them. If I know that there is a lot coming my way, then honestly like tournament or just more intense sparring, or if you really want to pressure test something where your hand will just inevitably be a potential target, then I would honestly say go for those, right? The Thokks have more of a focus on maneuverability, I feel, right? They are more of a motorcycle-ish type of design. There's more thought putting into these. They are, you know, there's a lot of thought that went into creating them, but they are definitely less protective than the Infinities, simply because they have much less hard plates going on, and that means that they can be more comfortable, especially in the fingers. It means you have an easier time getting them in some hills, even though, again, they are not small, right? They will fit into more hills, but a good number of hills will still be too small, especially more complex one, basket hills, these kind of things. Don't think that you will get those into them. So it's more comfortable, but less protective when it comes to that. That is a choice you can make, but you have to look at what you do, really, and see if that is the right choice. Problem I have, though, is that is, you know, when it just comes to which one is more comfortable, which one is more protective, I can give a recommendation, really. But when it comes to how durable they are, that's the point where I really have a hard time just recommending the Thokks in general at the moment, because we had so many straps tear on us, because we had seams just coming apart, because I've read about people being stabbed through them and just having some foam tear up on them and things like that. It's just, that just doesn't really inspire any confidence in them at the moment, which is a shame. I really wanted to like them. I still like using them. I'm just worried that they will fall apart in the non too distant future, really. Whereas I'm more confident in the Infinities in that regard. So if you do heavy work, tournament level intensity, or just want to really pressure test some things, and you are fine with them being a little bit less comfortable, and you know that your hilt will have room for them, definitely go for the Infinities, I would say. Though they do come with a waiting period, because it's still a comparatively small company that makes them. If, you know, issue with durability aside, if it is more medium level sparring that you do, not tournament level, not something where you really pressure test techniques where your hand can be a target, the Thokks would be fine. They are comfortable. You just have to make sure that you are aware of the limitations, like the side of the hand, you know, not being protected as much. That is, but you really have to be aware of that. But given the durability problems I see at the moment, I'm not sure I could recommend them anyway. So maybe if it is the Thokks you want and you don't need gloves, you don't need gloves right away. If you need some sort of glove that can kind of fill the same role, maybe look into Red Dragons and see how you can mod them. That is extra money you need to spend, but I think it can carry you over a while, especially if you maybe buy them a bit bigger and put an inside glove in, you know, that kind of stuff. It can maybe get you over the time that you need to see how these hold up and to see if there's any kind of correction on part of the manufacturer, if the problems are addressed, or if, you know, after a while the reviews just show that it's gotten better, really. And until then, I would say be a bit careful with the Thokks. There just seems to be some problems there, unfortunately. All right, you know, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have both, how's your experience with them? Because, you know, that's just my experience. I'm always interested to hear what you people have to say. So let me know. Cheers.